All right. Some of the following books have brought positive changes to my life, and some of them have literally changed my life. As someone who balances a career in the midst of personal life as well as trying to do freelance, it's a lot to manage. Hands down, I think the biggest struggle as an artist is the mental aspect of it, to stay on your game, to stay mentally level and just focus on moving forward, as well as keeping perspective of what's real right now. These books helped with that. I'm gonna shut up. I'm gonna talk about books now.
Books.
The first book is Essentialism by Mark Gowan. That's not true. The first book is Essentialism by Greg McKeown. Yeah, that's right. First off, I love this cover. That's what your mind will be, and that's what it will become. So when I started doing photo work, I really knew what I wanted to be doing. Photograph my friends and the places I go outside. But as success and opportunity come along, I just had a ton of options in front of me. I didn't choose the most wisest. That's correct grammar. So my 100% of focus was spread, 10, 5%, 30%, when 100% of it could have been focusing on my values and let my motivations support those values. But I was dumb. I spread my energy and focus too thin and focused on what was not essential. This book brought me back to the bigger picture and let me focus on what was truly essential right now to benefit that bigger picture. And then more importantly, to cut off the stuff that wasn't as essential. So, Essentialism by Greg McKeown, not Mark Gowan. Extreme Ownership by Jocko Willink and Leif Babin. All right, we're going to do a little Jenga here. Not bad. So I listened to this book on a long car ride, and it impacted me. Dichotomy of Leadership. Second, in the audiobook, they had like an hour of this for free, but we're talking about this one. As the premise of this book is just owning up, to not complain about any of the variables casted your way, and to not blame anyone else for your current situation that you're in that might not be that stellar. Just own up. I'm just going to read off my iPad because I just wrote it way better. When you own up to your actions and mistake, you forfeit the option to complain or cast blame on anyone or anything for your current situation. So with no one to blame and nothing to complain about, it's fully in your power to take control and change it. And that's not to forfeit the fault of anyone else. It's just giving you the power to change that situation. Stillness is the Key by Ryan Holiday. Oh! So even though that first quote wasn't directly from Ryan, it pretty much is the premise of his book. But it is one of my favorite quotes because I think it touches on something very important and very rare nowadays, being with yourself and your thoughts. So back in summer last year, it was actually before I read this book, I just wasn't in the best spot. I ended up deleting social media, and then I took on less work that summer. I started really focusing in on myself. I started journaling. Like, this is what my mind looked like, and this is what it looked more like. There's this really great quote, and it goes, examine your own motivations against your highest values, and the quote goes on. But when I made that time to disconnect, to think about things, and see where my motivations were headed, and weigh that against my values, that's when a lot of life change happened. It's a very integral part of my summer last year, and a lot of perspective shift that came. And this book pretty much sums up exactly what my summer was spent doing last summer. Not to brag, but brag. The Fifth Agreement by Don Miguel Ruiz and Don Jose Ruiz. So basically it talks about these 5 agreements, and I'll just read them off real quick. Be impeccable with your word, don't take anything personally, don't make assumptions, always do your best, and be skeptical, but learn to listen. But one that impacted me at the very beginning was don't take things personally. I used to take things so personally. I was like a sensitive little bitch. To be honest, as I was trying to think about how to explain this book, there's a reason it's a book. Like, I can tell you the title of those 5 agreements, and you're like, oh, cool, like that makes a lot of sense, but the way the way the Dons explain it in this book is really brilliant because they start from step 1, The first agreement being impeccable with your word, and they break down what a word actually is, and that's the foundation for each agreement following. Basically, it starts with this idea of communicate with symbols that make, and we've all agreed that, like, yes, this is what this word means.
Yes, this is what this word means, but when I talk about these words
with you are receiving it from your own. So even though we agree on the meanings of these words, our perspectives are different on them. That we are communicating to ourselves, like, internally, from our very own perspective. It's not real. Okay, so this book is next level smart, and I just gave you the trash Wikipedia SparkNotes version. You cannot summarize this book. Like, the way they lay it out is just straightforward explanations of just really good, timeless wisdom. 3, 2... Oh, it's going better than I thought. Let My People Go Surfing by Yvon Chouinard. If you don't know who that is, he owns Patagonia. When I read this book, it reminded me a lot of like when I started photography, and it brought me back to those true values in me of just the outdoors and the love of it. But the main point of this is they are keeping true to their principles of just loving the outdoors. They're not allowing it to be about the wrong thing. They're growing with the earth and sustainability in mind. As they were setting the standards back then for quality and now setting the standards for sustainability and quality, they know they can still make it better, which is like such a great mentality to live by. A master in the art of living draws no sharp distinction between their work and their play, their labor and their leisure, their mind and their body, their education and their recreation. They simply know which is which. They simply pursue their vision of excellence through whatever they are doing and leave others to determine whether they are working or playing. To them, they always appear to be doing both. We're at the bottom again. Pretty small book this time. Oh, yeah! Anything You Want by Derek Sivers. At the time of filming this, I read this book a couple weeks ago and pretty much finished it in an hour and a half of reading. Derek, the author, is the owner of a company he sold, or I guess he's not the owner anymore because he sold, called CD Baby, and then eventually sold it, and this is 40 lessons for a new kind of entrepreneur. In a semi-chronological order, Derek talks about why he started his business and then all the way to why he sold his business and all the lessons in between. There's 40 of them if you were unaware. There was a time in my freelance career where I was trying to push forward and make more happen. In that time of growth, I didn't really realize that I had enough in front of me. Like, I had what I wanted and I was happy. But instead of acknowledging and accepting that I had enough and I was happy, I pushed forward on all these other things that I didn't really want to be doing that would grow my business, which was the opportunity cost of me not enjoying the process as much. And yeah, that's basically his story, but on a much grander scale. Like, a common theme between these books is just revisiting your values and what's important, and this is no exception. Never forget why you're really doing what you're doing. Are you helping people? Are they happy? Are you happy? Are you profitable? Isn't that enough? Oh. Do the work. Actually, as I'm filming this, I'm in the midst of it. My bookmark's right there. And so far, I've really enjoyed it. Steven Pressfield has a very interesting style of writing. There's like bigger text here, smaller text here, different fonts there. It's a little all over the place, but in a really good way. This book is a lot about the work you want to be doing and the resistance that follows. He paints it almost like a figurative character that when you are striving for these bigger ideas, the figurative character encapsulates all the fears that go along with it. But for me, the most important one he touched on was perfectionism. I really enjoy finding that balance between scrappy and quality. That's why all the cuts in this are trash. Scrappy was pretty much the definition of my vlogs back in the day. Then somewhere between success and growth, I allowed this pressure to perform to settle in, to evolve from the scrappy vlogs and make them just quality. And as I tried to do that, it really wasn't my style and I wasn't enjoying the process, but I also was so focused on performance and quality of it, and thus perfectionism settled in. As you're striving to be perfect and this pressure to perform, it debunks the enjoyment of the process. And with all that overthinking going on, it also debunks the outcome quality of what it should have been. Man, I'm just grabbing from the bottom of the stack this whole time. Obstacle is the Way, another book by Ryan Holiday. That rhymes. So when I started working for Moment, which I don't know if I've really said on this channel, but I work for Moment. When I started working for them, I had a lot of anxiety about getting back in front of camera again. A lot of this anxiety came from like what I thought people would think, and also this pressure to perform about perfecting, again, perfectionism, like perfecting what I was doing. I cared too much about it, and a lot of anxiousness resulted. But this was my job now. Literally full send it every day toward the obstacle. I like hated the first few videos I made. Like, Caleb, if you're listening, hi. I hated the first few videos I made, and it's not your fault at all. It's not Moment's fault. It was just me and my anxiousness and my overthinking. But you just throw yourself at it, and like your overthinking, your overanalyzing dissolves a bit, and you notice you get a little bit better, and that gives you that confidence more and more. And at the end of the day, it provided a massive perspective shift to see it as an opportunity to improve and not let anxiety bulldoze that. And after throwing myself back into it so much, like, this is the result. Like, I'm making YouTube videos again, and a lot of you probably weren't aware that I was very anxious about it for such a long time, like debated years on making them again, and what it took was literally throwing myself right into the fire, like right into the obstacle, and that really solved so much. The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. So this book, as well as the following book, are probably the two that impacted my life the most. So listen up. So I was finding a lot of my self-worth in past successes that were already over and future successes that were just dreams. And in the same note, I was just bitter about past letdowns and anxious about future stuff. Like, none of it was real. The past was the past. The future doesn't actually exist. The only thing that is real is right now. And what this book showed me, that was up to me to choose which one I wanted to focus on. The two things that weren't real, or like right now, like the only thing that actually is real. Back then I wasn't in a good spot, but once I accepted it for what it was, I had the power to change it. And that's really what, just such a small part of what this book did for me. Instead of trying to change my situations all the time and trying to force that, like focusing on changing my perspective of it. What can I derive and learn from this? Like, what good can I find? Like, when you start thinking in that perspective, all of a sudden now is a lot more swallowable. I don't know if that's the right word. I would read like 4 or 5 pages and just be like, shit. Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday. This is another situation where my words will fall just so short of how this book has impacted me. Ego is a lot more than just the basic understanding of someone who like thinks they're all that. Like, ego is a freaking monster. Similar to The Power of Now, ego is the same kind of concept. You are identifying with something that isn't actually truly real. I was finding my identity and self-worth in past successes and future excitement. I felt this pressure to keep this ego up, to keep whatever I was doing up in order to satisfy this ego. Like, it's a really hard concept to explain. It showed me like, hey, you don't have to be doing this, man. Like, the things that are going to make you happy is not what you're chasing. The things that are going to make you happy is right there in front of you. You just have to give up this image you're trying to keep. Like, there's this line in here: I just spent 4 hours talking about this. Doesn't that count for something? The answer is no. Like, that line may not mean much to you, but when I was listening to this on audiobook for the first time, like, it sent me like, it messed me up. It started the journey to just better self-awareness and an acceptance of what is real. Frick. I probably sound crazy. I'm just painting a picture of where I was at when I read this book. Like, mentally, I was not solid. And this book, hands down, wrecked me and started that journey of just better self-awareness. It's like sweeping the floor. Just because we've done it once doesn't mean the floor is clean forever. Every day the dust comes back. Every day we must sweep. The same is true for ego. You will be stunned at what kind of damage dust and dirt can do over time, and how quickly it accumulates and becomes utterly unmanageable. It's a beautiful metaphor for really it's just self-awareness on what you're doing right now that's benefiting that bigger picture. The best advice I can give is to read this book in tandem with the power of now. Like, this is what I did earlier last year in summer, and, you know, it took me way too long to read both of these, but it was because I would, you know, read a few pages and just be like, shit. I would sit on those pages for a few days, write about it, and then just move on to the next one, and same thing, read it. Shit. I think reading these two books in tandem is probably one of the best things you can do with your life. So anyways, I'll read another couple passages. When we remove ego, we're left with what is real. What replaces ego is humility. Rock hard humility and confidence. Whereas ego is artificial, this type of confidence can hold weight. Ego is stolen. Ego is self-anointed. Confidence is earned. It's the difference between potent and poisonous. That's it. Actually, you might have noticed this stack of books to the right of me. In the midst of reading those in the midst of reading those falafels, in the midst of reading all those wisdom and philosophical type books, I also like to have a more for fun book, a fictional or not necessarily focused on philosophy, self-help type stuff. I also have a journal that I write a bunch of stuff in. You should journal too. Been reading the Narnia series. This supermarket book is by Logic, the rapper. I highly recommend reading The Alchemist. Read all the Harry Potters to try to impress a girl, but didn't work out. No complaints. It was a good book series. Having a for fun book, I think, is very essential in life, because you can't just focus on being like, you just can't, like, you know? All these books are linked down below, so go check them out there. Reading, it changed my life, and I always made the excuse that I just couldn't read. I was too ADD, I couldn't focus, and that is bullshit. I've been reading a ton since last summer, and if you are using that as an excuse, you're looking at a super ADD person here who loves reading. So just find a topic you like and let it rip. With that, deuces.